So we're talking still about the causes of anemia. We know a little bit now about nutrition. So sometimes anemia is caused by the body not being able to make a normal amount of red blood cells. But there are other situations where the body's bone marrow is completely capable of doing its job. But there's a limit to how well your body can make red blood cells, even if you're in excellent nutrition and in excellent health. That's why you're only allowed to donate blood at the Red Cross drive. I think, what is it, every 4 weeks, every 6 weeks? So there are two ways that you are losing red blood cells faster than you can make them. One of those ways is if you've got a hemorrhagic anemia. Hemorrhagic anemia means hemorrhage, you're bleeding somewhere. Now, in humans, the most common causes of hemorrhagic anemias would be because a woman has had a lot of blood loss in her menstrual cycle through her period, or because people are bleeding into their digestive tract or into their urinary bladder, right? Now, let me give you one little point of fact here, that if you think that a person who has been bleeding into their intestinal tract for a while is going to tell you, the doctor or nurse, that they're bleeding into their intestinal tract, you're wrong, because people be crazy, all right? People who are losing blood into their digestive tract or losing blood into their urinary system, or sometimes even with heavy periods, they won't tell the doctor or nurse because they're afraid they have cancer. And I know what you're saying. Just because they don't tell me about it doesn't mean they don't have cancer, right? But people will still do that. How do I know? A friend of mine's husband, when he was in his 40s, he had colon cancer. And by the time it was diagnosed, it was really, really late. And for 9 months, he had been bleeding into his digestive tract. So blood was coming out in his poop. And he would cancel the doctor's appointments that my friend made. And she didn't know what was going on, right? A friend of mine's dad, he ended up in the ER because he passed out. He was so anemic, and he had been bleeding into his urinary tract for several months and had been unwilling to tell anyone. So hemorrhagic anemias very often are due to cancer. But if we don't know, we can't treat it, right? And then there are hemolytic anemias. Do you remember autoimmune anemias? Autoimmune anemias, we'll talk about it one more time, is when the body's own immune system starts attacking our own cells, right? That happened with type 1 diabetes. There is a type of autoimmune condition where your own immune cells have created a way to destroy your red blood cells, right? So two different ways of having anemias happen. Either your bone marrow can't make enough, or your bone marrow is making plenty, but they're getting destroyed even faster. Don't make enough, lose cells faster than you make them. Now, how does your body know how many red blood cells to make? Well, it actually goes back to the kidney. I know on this image it also shows the liver, but it actually is the kidney, right? The kidney here has got cells in it that they decide, hey, am I getting enough oxygen? And if they don't like the amount of oxygen they're getting, they will send out a hormone, and that hormone is called erythropoietin. Oh, is it written here anyway? Just the abbreviation, erythropoietin, right here. Erythropoietin is abbreviated EPO, right? So there are times when the kidney, actually pretty much every day, the kidney will go, oh, I don't think I'm getting enough oxygen, send out some erythropoietin. The target cells for that hormone will be found in the bone marrow. And when that hormone binds to those target cells, it'll cause those target cells to make more red blood cells. More red blood cells get made. They send out more oxygen. More oxygen is being transported. The kidney's happy, and it quits sending out erythropoietin, right? So, and by the way, this is why if you go up to Big Bear for a week or two, your kidney cells will go, what's up with this? I'm not getting enough oxygen. They will make more than the usual amount of erythropoietin. You'll make more than the usual number of red blood cells, and you'll have more red blood cells for every drop of blood. And So the things that will stimulate more erythropoiesis because of more erythropoietin are low levels of oxygen, like going to a high altitude, or if you do more exercise. One of the cures for anemia in an otherwise healthy patient is to start doing more exercise. I know it seems counterintuitive, but when you do more exercise, there are moments when you're huffing and puffing and your kidneys are like, oh, I want more oxygen. And this whole thing happens. So, increase in exercise will cause you to make more red blood cells. Patients that have really severe lung disease, like people with severe emphysema, we'll talk about what that is when we get to the lungs, they will not be able to get enough oxygen into their body. So they will always make too many red blood cells. And this problem of too many red blood cells happens in emphysema. And those patients often need to have their blood drawn on a regular basis just to keep their blood down at a normal concentration. Now we've got how long do red blood cells live? Even though red blood cells don't do a whole bunch, they don't live forever. But they live for a long time considering they don't have a nucleus. They live for about 4 months. That's a long time. But at the end of their lives, when the red blood cell needs to go to the great bone marrow in the sky, the body doesn't just exhale them or send them out in your pee or something like that, right? Those red blood cells have got a dangerous protein inside of them, hemoglobin. And that hemoglobin needs to be handled very carefully. And so red blood cells need to be gently dismantled, usually by the spleen and by the liver. So when the red blood cells are ready to go on to their next step, they're going to be taken apart. And when they're taken apart, the hemoglobin inside of them will be broken up into heme and globin. The globin, by the way, that was the protein part of this particular complicated protein. And that protein part will be dismantled into the component monomers, the amino acids, and they will get recycled. They'll get used for protein synthesis. So an amino acid that was part of your hemoglobin one day could be part of your hair the next day, right? So the globin part gets recycled. Now, when it comes to the heme, inside the middle of every heme, there is an iron atom. Iron's actually not that abundant in our normal food. So we do our best to recycle all of the iron that we can. Okay, so the two things that get recycled are the amino acids from the protein and the iron from the heme. I'm saying it twice because it's on the next exam. Right? Now, what doesn't get recycled? The heme part doesn't get recycled, and it goes through several steps. And I don't need you to know all of the steps. I want you to remember that heme is going to be discarded, not recycled, discarded as bilirubin. The liver will take this substance, bilirubin, and throw it into that green stuff bile. We'll be talking more about bile when we get to the digestive tract, and that is going to get thrown into the small intestine. Now, I think this is kind of weird, so I'm going to share it with you. The only reason that your poop is brown instead of gray is because of the bilirubin. That's the only reason. If there is an obstruction between the liver and the intestinal tract so that the bile can't be thrown away, poop starts coming out gray. If you ever hear that someone's having gray poop, that's not just oh, that's weird, what'd you eat? No. That's life-threatening. You got to get them in. And it's your way of knowing that that patient's body is not able to throw away bilirubin into the bile. Needs to be seen. Oh, also, the only reason there's any yellow color in your urine is because of bilirubin. Now, let's talk about blood clotting, all right? With blood clotting, someday when you're in your clinical program, you will learn all about the really complicated clotting cascades. I think they're complicated, and I like complicated, okay? So we're going to talk just about one of those many proteins, and we're going to talk about this part of the blood, the platelets. Remember, platelets are something that you can see through the microscope. Technically, they're not cells. They are fragments of cells, fragments of megakaryocytes, all right? Now, even though they don't have a nucleus, they're not even a cell, they're just a fragment of a cell, do you know that they can still swallow up a bacteria if they feel like it? That's crazy, right? But what are their biggest jobs? Their biggest jobs, their biggest functions are to secrete vasoconstrictors. Chemicals called vasoconstrictors get released by blood platelets when you've got a cut. And when you've got a cut, those vasoconstrictors will take the normal little blood vessels you've got and constrict them, make them smaller. When they are smaller, they will not let blood go through them as much, right? Platelets also, if you make them mad, they will stick together and they will form a structure called a platelet plug. Platelet plugs are temporary. We'll get back to that in a second. The third thing that they do is they secrete what we're just going to call clotting factors. Clotting factors are mostly enzymes that will trigger really complicated cascades of one chemical doing something, doing a something, doing a something. But what it all ends up doing is cleaving the fibrinogen so that it becomes fibrin. And when it's fibrin, it creates a blood clot. All right. It can do some other things too, but we're not going to be covering that in this part of the class. So step number one, platelets most of the time are just they kind of remind me of like Pringles potato chips, They're really small, much smaller than a red blood cell, actually smaller than they're shown here. And the life of a platelet is a pretty tedious one. They're just zipping around all of the time, right? And what do they see? They see the simple squamous epithelial tissue called endothelium that lines all of the blood vessels. And they see plasma and they see red blood cells. And occasionally they see a white blood cell going by. But that's all they ever see. That's their entire universe. But if you get a cut or a bruise, then what do they see? Oh my God, they see the basement membrane underneath the simple squamous epithelium. Oh no, and they freak out, okay? So on step one, they see something that freaks them out. And when they freak out, they're no longer looking like little Pringles potato chips. Now they kind of look like a really angry amoeba, and they're reaching out and they're trying to stick to anything they can. And we call that platelet adhesion, okay? Simultaneously with platelet adhesion, they are going to start to release vasoconstrictors. And one of the vasoconstrictors is serotonin. Now, if serotonin rings a bell with you, it will be because you read that serotonin is also a neurotransmitter. And that shouldn't surprise you anymore, right? Because now we know that molecules like serotonin, they are not doing anything on their own. They're just communication molecules. They act like keys. When serotonin is released into a synapse, it's the key that unlocks a lock that causes an action potential. But when serotonin is released in this context, it's a key that turns a mechanism that is going to cause blood vessels to get smaller, and we call that vasoconstriction. Now we've got step two. These they're no longer Pringles potato chips, right? They're real angry platelets. I'm so angry. And they're grabbing onto each other. They're grabbing onto all the cells around them. They're grabbing onto the edges of the wound. And they create this really big living plug. And as soon as they form the plug, they go, okay, everyone contract. And they go, and then they contract the plug. Right? So the formation of a blood clot is something you'll see a lot if you're ever handling blood samples, and you'll come to recognize that you need to let that platelet, that clot, sit for a moment so that it will contract. Okay? But at the same time, the platelets have been releasing substances that will begin a fibrin clot. Now, fibrinogen, these are individual, relatively large proteins that are just dissolved in your plasma. You would never even know that they are there, right? But once you start a blood clot, the things that were released because of what the platelets did will cut fibrinogen and turn it into fibrin. And fibrin is going to bind together to each other and convert the fibrinogen into threads of fibrin, and that makes up mostly the structure of a blood clot. By the way, all the way back, I think it was at video 1, I told you that plasma, the watery part of the blood, and serum, the watery part of the blood, are not the same things. It is called plasma when it still contains fibrinogen and all of the clotting factors. After it is clotted, after the blood has clotted, then in the liquid portion, there won't be any fibrinogen anymore. There won't be any clotting factors anymore. So that is called serum, the difference between serum and plasma. All right, we'll be moving on to the immune system.